What's your name?
My name is Ifeanyi Osuji.
Say it again.
Ifeanyi Osuji. Yeah.
You're going to have a minute to pitch. Tell us what you're building. Get some feedback. You ready?
Yeah.
What are you building?
So I'm building Haggler AI. It's an AI negotiation platform. I'm a software engineer. I've been a software engineer for 13 years now. Most recently, I worked at Atlassian. How I came about Haggler AI was I was out shopping for jewelry for my wife, and I had no negotiation leverage. I kept getting ripped off, obviously. So I decided to build something that would help me, and then eventually decided to extend that to others. Eventually want to evolve into something that actually negotiates autonomously for people. Multimodal AI with voice, speech, vision. Launched the chatbot in November last year. The iOS app launched last month. We have about 1,000 signups with using social ads traction channel. So that's what we're
just under a minute. So negotiation through the utilization of just calling the foundational models over the problem set. How do you handle negotiation?
So right now we're focusing on the jewelry market, which is a $370 billion market globally. So that's actually an interesting market because these are precious metals where you can actually, you need to get the real-time data on how much these things are worth right now. There's actual factual data that you need to retrieve. And then also, so it serves as a benchmark, right? So the AI would basically retrieve this data and, do its calculations, figure out what the estimated reasonable retail price should be for your jewelry. And then you have the ability to say at this point, we're at the stage where you get that as a benchmark and you have to negotiate, but we want to get to a point where the AI negotiates on your behalf.
So you're right now not really negotiating, but you provide the comparable.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. So it's not actually ChatGPT wrapper as I thought it is, right?
No, it's more like a retrieval wrapper, which I don't love as much, to be honest. I was surprised by it. I mean, it's interesting. So when you answered the jewelry thing, two things happened. The first thing that happened, I was like, oh, interesting first market, because there's an asymmetry to the jewelry market. There's an asymmetry to the pricing. It was some of the point you made.
Yeah.
And so as a buyer, especially in that case, or if I'm, all these TikTok accounts that are these New York jewelry,
Yeah.
You've seen these. And so that's a fascinating space where there's a lot of asymmetry and there's a lot of haggling. And so there are uncertain outcomes. And so it makes sense to kind of want something like this and something that's non-deterministic in the back and forth. So that was my first reaction. Then you pointed out that the thing you need to do that well is retrieve a bunch of canonically correct or market correct information.
Yeah.
And suddenly I didn't like it as much, to be honest. And that's a little bit pitch feedback. Maybe it's product feedback of then it means every industry you enter, the first thing you have to do before you have this awesome negotiation integrated service, and then there's the where is it integrated question that I have in a sec. But that means every industry you enter, you have to get good at retrieving the market correct data.
How about buying used cars?
Yeah.
You need to haggle there a lot, I guess, right?
So I do believe that every market would have its different ways of benchmarking and pulling data and stuff like that. That's why you do need to focus on a vertical. You can't just build a generalistic negotiation platform. There's some folks that, for instance, there are some folks right now in the market that are focusing on procurement, right? There are some folks.
A lot of folks focusing on procurement. You've heard these pitches, I'm sure.
So right now you have
B2B,
Walmart. I believe Walmart just recently, they actually use AI negotiations for their procurement contracts. So you, instead of manually having
What does that mean really, though? When I say this, even, I don't like these procurement B2B SaaS startups a lot because I'm kind of where are we going with this? AI is going to negotiate. Exactly. And now we're going to be talking AI to AI.
So apparently they're getting good feedback. So now so basically the AI is renegotiating contracts. And so the clients are actually loving negotiating negotiating with AI, because it's like I'm not too sure on their use case yet, but it seems like.
Why do you imagine people like yours? So where is it going to be in the workflow? Do I, as the buyer?
By the way, is it offline or online?
Huh?
Is it for offline or online buying?
Both, right? So right now we're focusing on B2C, which is like consumers. You have the app. So how it would work is you walk into a jewelry store,
so offline.
And you walk into a jewelry store and you say, hey, am I getting a good deal or not, right? You ask your AI assistant. Or if you're shopping online, you see a price online and you ask your AI assistant like, hey, am I getting a good deal? Or you're on your phone, you take a screenshot, which is what we just added now. You take a screenshot, you upload it on the app, and it would like
okay. I always wonder, we probably don't have time to go into detail, that based on information I see, I often don't really have enough to measure, right? So for example, I don't know the quality of gold, quality of the stone, right? I don't even, from a screenshot, you don't even often know the size, right? So, and then how does the app can measure the price, right?
So that's actually the same question that I had, because to your point, right? As a early stage startup, we're iterating on user feedback, right? So to your point around like Wrapper, yes, I would love as an engineer to go and build my own model, but I'm not focusing on the engineering part of things right now. I want to know, do the customers care about what I'm building? I'm in a stage.
How early are you?
Huh?
How early are you in the journey?
They have users. I think.
Yeah, but like how many months?
So just we launched in November last year. So we had the iOS app last month. So right now we're iterating on feedback. The picture one was actually a feedback that we got from investors, incubators and such. So I had the same question. I'm like, the computer is not going to understand these details about like how much it weighs, how many carats, but because we're dealing with an AI, it can always clarify with the user. It can ask the user, hey, I can't figure out this stuff. Can you let me know? Can you ask the jeweler, right?
Yeah, here's the question you need to ask. That's actually a good like guided negotiations. Like, tell me what I need to ask, because like I don't know what to ask. It's
exactly.
Like, you know?
So that's how because I initially didn't really understand how we could solve that problem, but then it just hit me one day like, hey, the AI could just ask if it needed additional details, right?
So the interesting thing here is that I'm actually not sure what will happen first. Is like the startups like this be successful, or we reach like the point of negotiation. So there are two thoughts, right? So in general, first on, if there are two AIs from two sides negotiating, and they will end up, and there is already this on the medical side, there's AI submitting claims, and there's AI denying claims, and they fight, and they appeal, and then they deny appeal, and so on. And that,
which, by the way, is a good thing. If anyone wants to know why, find me afterwards.
But it is basically create an efficient market in the same way as high frequency trading created efficient market on stocks, right? So basically that 50 years ago or 70 years ago, this price discovery on stock market was about guys like yelling the prices on the floor. Now you click a button and you know that you're getting efficient price for the stock, right? That there is a point in the future where maybe all the jewelry will be like efficient price that you cannot negotiate away, because the seller gets exactly like 0.1% margin and they will not go lower, right? But the question is, how far is it? Like, I remember there was like a interesting, like my personal story. My personal, like I had a lot of misses as an investor, but one miss that I had as an investor was a company called Truebill. That's now Rocket something.
Yeah.
So this is the company, if you know, it's now $1 billion company that has the whole simplistic feature. It allows you to connect to your credit card and cancel your subscriptions. And to me, it was like, what a stupid app. Who will need another app to pay 30% or 40% to just cancel their Netflix? I can perfectly cancel my Netflix myself. And so I passed on it because I thought nobody will use it. And obviously everybody used it, and everybody used it for enough years that it got to $1 billion plus acquisition before the market became efficient, right? And the market there is still inefficient. There are still a lot of people out there who have Netflix or Apple TV subscription that they don't actually use, they need to. And so the thing here is that it's very interesting dilemma for VC is like all markets are getting more efficient, right? And maybe the market will get efficient before you reach $1 billion, valuation, or maybe you will reach it before the market gets efficient. So that's like a little bit rant on the side, right?
Well, no, and I have an interesting related thought, and it's funny you brought up Truebill, because what I was going to bring up is do not pay.
Yeah, do not pay is another interesting case, right?
The founder's kind of weird.
Yeah.
You know about this company?
No, I haven't.
So do not pay, very strange founder. Have you met him?
I haven't met him, but tell about the company.
So the whole idea is there are a variety of things in our life, kind of like our subscriptions, that we don't want to deal with, but can be dealt with in an automated fashion. He did this before the age of LLMs, where basically it was like, hey, do you have like a parking ticket you don't want to deal with? It's an actual thing he tried, I think, legally. The legal stuff he got in trouble for, but he would go for subscriptions. He'd be the one to like try to negotiate your bill by auto-emailing a vendor like Netflix and being like, I'm going to cancel. But really he knew that if he did that 3 times, they'd offer a discount, then he'd take the discount. And again, it was a lot of automated workflows around transactions that the user did not want to deal with. And again, he wanted to get the parking tickets, gym cancellations.
Yeah.
And so he would deal with it because he knew there's a human interaction arbitrage. And so if I take off my investor feedback hat for a second, because you're early and I like that, and I like that you're like saying you're in the feedback mode. So let's go product conversation here. I liked this concept when I imagined more like you were a shopping assistant than purely a negotiation assistant, because I think, to Yar's point, but also an overall point, negotiation, we don't know where it's going, and I don't like that you need to be in specific markets where there's a retrieval element and you have to go retrieve in that industry. Therefore, your launches, you can't go vertical to vertical until you get that data. If you were a generalized engagement tool, kind of like the do not pay, but the AI version that said, hey, we know that there's like human interaction arbitrage, and negotiation is always a part of that, but there's a lot of other stuff too of like, we can do the auto emailing for you, and we can ingest the email, and we can know when to put a human in the loop when it gets complicated, because that is more impervious to the perfect, or at least it'll last longer, where there's a lot in the interaction with a vendor, or let's say I'm buying jewelry online, of like, oh, I want the thing to ask questions so that I know that this jeweler with 0 reviews, I don't know if I want to buy until I email them 4 times and they've responded 4 times in what looks like human fashion. Or again, I want to return something in a certain way. Or maybe you can use this on Facebook Marketplace for any item. And again, your understanding as the startup would be there's a human interaction component to this transaction that we can arbitrage utilizing AI and automation. Now, that doesn't mean go take this idea, but I offer this to you because I think this has, again, the time component of how long does negotiation last, plus this notion of you not being able to go industry to industry so fast, that I think means, like, as an example today, you're going to need to go find a bunch of people who need to buy jewelry, and in markets where you have the data, versus a shopping assistant that is generalizable might not be as accurate. So it's not doing as much of this, I know exactly what this thing should cost, and I'm going to give you a very good number to give to the other person, but it might be more useful. And again, you might say specific to this use case, it's your baby. But like I say that to say, I wonder how many walls your current setup has that you're going to hit pretty quickly. But I like the overall concept of something that, again, is arbitraging on human interaction.
Yeah, and to add to that, actually, it kind of reminds me of one of the previous conversations we had today, because one of the ways to look at it is that it's an app, and it's an app for a user to utilize a specific interaction in their day when they go into like a jewelry store or they open up the app. And there is a huge problem that I see with a lot of apps that are built for a very specific use case, that it's a frequency and require the behavior change, and people don't know to look for it, right? There are so many people going to jewelry store. How do you get them to know to search for your app? It's like almost impossible, right? So, and this is why very specific apps for specific like niche find it very, very hard to survive. And it's definitely not a VC
I was
thing.
mentioning earlier, you're probably downstairs, there's this app, this GPT wrapper, Cal, which is like a calorie counter that's like making $2 million like a 17-year-old.
Yeah,
you've seen this. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because you're doing like the image recognition too, which they did. So, okay, great. So the reason that's so compelling in comparison to this is what the point I was making, which is like there's a constant, very frequent, exactly. So the behavior change is really easy, because if you try it and you decide to use it for 2 days, you're going to snap your food 3 times, maybe over 2 days. And so you're building the muscle immediately versus you need to find someone, unlike eating, we don't do it right away after we download the app. So then we need to be at the perfect jewelry moment. Then you need to get me to download it. Then I need to be in the right interaction. And so if you go with that generalized shopping, maybe we do generalized shop once a day or twice a day. Yeah. And so like that calorie counting thing, the behavior change is going to be more possible because it's more visible and frequent. So I really like that point. I think it gets to, some of the tension here.
Yeah. So to your point, what's actually interesting is that there is an opportunity for an enterprise version of this. And I have seen it where, for instance, let's assume like in the Cal AI app you talked about, right? There is a situation where you hit the paywalls, and if you don't convert, they try to offer you a discounted pricing. So that's where negotiation, right. That's where enterprise negotiation, AI negotiation comes into play, where now instead of just hitting with a blanket discount, you can have an AI negotiate on the other side,
discounting thing, but that's just like MarTech.
That's MarTech, yeah. There's a whole
AI is not as exciting there.
There's a whole level of knowledge about like how to propagate
pricing elasticity and all that stuff. Yeah. I mean, you're right, but it's for the sake of time, this is super interesting. Thank you so much for
sharing. Thanks, appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Takeaways.
First of all, thank you for great, interesting startups, really good discussions. I think that one thing that, I try to focus today on is, guys, try not to forget that you need to tell VCs the compelling vision, right? What if this is a venture-backable startup, right? And then explain why you're different, and also make sure it's memorable, right? So there was definitely a couple startups that are memorable. Let's test, right? So, how many of the 6 startups we can remember? Obviously, the last one is easy, right? So because it just was here, right?
AI Haggler.
AI Haggler, right? So there was obviously fertility clinics.
Exactly.
That was very memorable.
Super
the
memorable.
law guy, right? So case law,
mid-page.
Mid-page, yeah. There was also a real estate broker thing, right? So the what estate agent. What else was there? There was something about journaling, shared journals.
Shared journaling, Waffle.
Okay, now we are missing one.
Ooh, restaurant one.
Restaurant, yes. CFO for restaurants, yeah.
Yeah. To your point, the one that's going to stick with me tomorrow is going to be the fertility one. It was the most dynamic, interesting vision of the future of like, hey, if this is solved, fertility is a crisis.
It's impact, right? So it's like, let's not forget that one of the things that also a lot of VCs, at least me, right, look for is like, are we getting the world to a better place, right? So is it obvious that this is getting the world to a better place? And if this succeeds, will I be proud of this succeeding? This is why I don't want to invest in gambling, right? If this succeeds, I want to be proud of this succeeding, right?
I think the one that I'll remember second is probably the case law one. And that's probably because we took a long time to talk about the user experience over time. So there's 2 versions, right? It's the vision and the impact. And another one that probably is going to be the most memorable is going to be the one where we got so in the weeds that I was like, oh, those are interesting user experiences that got me to think that could work. And so again, it's like one or the other will often be the overriding, but we want both, right? We want the ability to concisely say, here's my vision, to your point, here's my starting point, or the opposite. But if you can get to both, and again, concisely, Mike Ma, who's been a guest venture on this, I keep stealing his line, compelling but not complete, which means tell both versions of like the long term and the short term. Don't try to be comprehensive in either. Instead, again, the way I refer to it is drive-bys. Give the drive-by of what it is today. Give the drive-by of what I want it to be in 10 years. Give the drive-by and the opposite. The takeaway that I'll add to this is sometimes, and in this case, in only one pitch, but I think this is important, the user experience walking through, actually the case law one, it could have 2 of them, the case law one and the fertility one. I often don't like the cliche, imagine a user Jane, and Jane goes and does this, and my startup, that's like such a cliche to like go through the user journey in such a plotting way. But when you have a complicated product or a product where a lot of people will need to learn new details about how the world works, that can often be really valuable because it allows you to create a clearer before and after picture, a clearer picture of what's happening. It's the world building portion, right? What's happening today and how do you make things quite different? So sometimes getting that message across involves, I think, delineating through maybe a user journey or some other kind of linear method, if you are successful, or even if your MVP is successful, how does someone's life change?
Yeah. I think another thing is that, of course, it's not always, it's enough to put, it's not always enough time to put in 1 minute, and we didn't often ask questions, but there are 2 questions that is good to answer quickly is why you and why now, right? So, and there were a couple that actually, so the fertility clinic guy at least said that he dealt with the problem. The restaurant guy said that I think he did own a restaurant. He actually operated a restaurant, right? There was one that actually had an opposite answer, the case law. Oh, I'm just a programmer, I want to help my lawyer friends. This is actually a bad answer, right? So it's like, and we had to dig out. But for a few others, I don't know why, right? Yeah. So it's like, why you for Haggler, right? So why you for, I know, voice agent guy said that he had a restaurant, real estate. The real estate voice agent.
He had a brokerage, yeah.
He had a brokerage, right? So that was really good answer. He had a brokerage, so he knows what he is building, right? So though he didn't explain how he sells to other brokerages, not necessarily, but yeah. But why now is another good question. And why not earlier than now? And why not later than now, right? So this is also an interesting angle that we didn't cover today, yeah.
No, but I think one of the reasons we didn't cover it, and I think this is the overall, we had some really good, and I really appreciated your sharp feedback for these founders today. In a lot of these cases, these imperfect pitches were hiding a more interesting product. So I think one of the things for people to think about is if you're not getting what you want out of investors, it might be, it's not necessarily the idea is wrong. A lot of early stage founders will like go back to the shop and go, what am I doing wrong? And they'll try to tweak the product itself. In a lot of these cases, I actually think we found products that were quite interesting, but it was in their framing that we were unable to see what was so interesting about them, right? And so like for a lot of folks, I want them not to hear feedback and questions and go, I must therefore revise what I'm building. But instead, I'm clearly not communicating the things that I know are valuable about this, and I need to figure that portion out. Super cool. Yeah. Just like last time, super sharp, awesome feedback for all those 6 founders. Really appreciate you and all of your advice.
Thank you.
Shout out to the 6 founders who got up on stage. It's not easy with these lights and cameras. Shout out to both the in the room and out of the room team of the Feedback Loop. And happy Tuesday.